Have you ever heard laughter in the middle of the night? Not loud laughter, not a soft chuckle either, but a sound like someone trying to laugh while their throat is being squeezed. A screech squeezed through flesh and gaps where a mouth should have been. That was the kind of laughter the Hargrave family heard on a moonless night, at exactly 3:13 a.m. And from that moment on, none of them ever kept their faces whole again. This story doesn't begin with a death, nor with a ghost. It begins with a postcard. No sender, just a messy line scrawled in ink. Return to where blood once soaked the ground. I'm still waiting. The recipient was Thomas Hargrave, a man who had lied, who had run, who had pretended that his ancestors had no history. But blood doesn't forget, and every role waits for the actor to return to the stage. You're listening to The Torn Smile, Two Spirits, One Body. The first part is about the head. The next will speak of the body. But remember this before you dive into the story: not everyone who laughs is alive, and not everyone without a head is dead. Welcome back to Whisper Horror Channel. Before we begin, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell for updates. The old Ford creaked along the muddy dirt road, flanked by trees whose drooping branches looked like bony arms reaching out in grim welcome. Inside, the air was even heavier than the damp fog cloaking the world outside. Thomas Hargrave gripped the steering wheel tight, his knuckles pale. His eyes stayed on the road ahead, but his mind drifted. Debts, phone calls from creditors, the slow erosion of pride that comes when a man who once had everything begins to lose it all. Are we almost there, Dad? Eliza's voice came softly from the back seat. She was 17, the youngest, and her question broke the hour-long silence. Her head rested against the cold window pane, staring at the monotony of woods and mist. Her eyes were deep, clear, and carried a sensitivity that bordered on fragile. Thomas cleared his throat and tried to sound calm. Almost there, sweetheart. Just around this bend. Beside him, Clarissa, his wife, fidgeted with a frayed wool scarf. She had once been radiant, but recent years had etched their burdens into the corners of her eyes. She turned back to their children and offered a tired smile. It'll be all right. Your grandma said this place is peaceful. A fresh start for all of us. A fresh start in the middle of nowhere. Landon muttered. The 19-year-old slouched in the back seat, headphones clamped over his ears, eyes glued to his phone despite there being no signal. Landon was the embodiment of teenage rebellion, restless, irritable, and bitter about being yanked from city life into some forgotten countryside. Bet there's not even Wi-Fi here. Landon, Clarissa sighed, her voice warm. Please don't. This is our home now. At last, the car reached the end of the dirt road and stopped before a rusted iron gate. Beyond it stood a two-story Victorian mansion, its white paint peeling in thick patches, exposing the rotting wood underneath. The black shingled roof was broken in places, resembling a mouthful of decayed teeth. The house held a kind of eerie elegance, majestic and crumbling, worn down by time and neglect. It stood silently, back pressed against the dense woods, gazing out over the sluggish, fog-wrapped crimson river. The river wasn't crimson at all, but murky grey, still and glass-like. Thick mist rose from its surface, curling around the foundation of the house like a burial shroud. Well, Thomas said, forcing cheer into his voice, it's got character, doesn't it? No one replied. They stepped out into the cold, damp air of the riverside, the scent of wet soil, decaying leaves, and something vaguely metallic filled their noses. Eliza looked up at the house. She had the uneasy sense that it was looking back, its darkened windows like empty eye sockets. A chill ran down her spine. And it wasn't just the cold. While Thomas fumbled with a ring of old keys at the heavy oak door, Landon's foot kicked something hidden in the weeds. He bent down and picked up a red rubber clown nose. It was cracked, aged, but somehow still vividly red. He gave it a light squeeze. It let out a faint, dry squeak. "Nice," Landon sneered, tossing it in the air and catching it. "Free toys." The lock finally gave way. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, dust-laden interior. Weak light from outside illuminated furniture draped in white sheets, like ghosts sitting in silent vigil. The air was stale and heavy with mold. "Welcome home," Thomas said, his voice echoing awkwardly in the stillness. As the family stepped inside, the door groaned and slammed shut behind them with a thunderous thud, sealing them off from the world outside, as if the house had swallowed them whole. Only Eliza turned back, for a brief second, just before the door fully closed. She caught a glimpse of a dark red balloon hovering above the crimson river, still, silent, as if watching them. The first few days passed in a blur of cleaning and organizing. The house felt like a giant body slowly awakening from a long slumber. Dust was swept away. White sheets were pulled from furniture, and forgotten antiques began to reveal traces of their former charm. Thomas busied himself with repairs, forcing a kind of strained enthusiasm. Clarissa reorganized the kitchen. Landon drifted from room to room, wearing a bored expression, only helping out when his mother demanded it. Only Eliza truly explored the house. She wandered the long, silent hallways, fingertips trailing across faded floral wallpaper. She discovered hidden corners, secret passages tucked behind bookshelves, and a room filled with relics from an old traveling circus, cracked masks with grotesquely wide grins, tattered costumes in garish colors, and faded posters for a forgotten troupe, Phineas Blackwood's traveling circus, where the strangest dreams come true. On one poster, a clown's face loomed, smiling from ear to ear, with hollow, lifeless eyes. His name was printed beneath it, Robbie Bale, the laughing clown. But what drew Eliza most was the attic. The door to it sat at the end of the second-floor hallway, sealed not with a lock, but by dozens of thick, rusted iron nails hammered deep into the wood from the outside, as if someone had tried to trap something inside, or keep something out. "Dad, why's the attic door nailed shut?" Eliza asked while Thomas wrestled with a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink. Thomas wiped sweat from his brow. "Probably because it's old and unsafe. Grandma told us not to go up there. Just leave it alone." His voice held a note of avoidance. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the house. The groaning of old wood contracting in the cold, the whistle of wind through the roof's cracks, and the gentle flow of the crimson river outside. But there was another sound, one she couldn't quite place. A faint whisper, like silk brushing against silk, coming from above her ceiling, from the direction of the attic. She sat up and went to the window. The fog was thicker than usual, milky white, hiding the river entirely. She stared into the dark, and then she saw it. Under the gnarled oak tree at the edge of the yard, a figure stood, not clearly visible, just a shadow darker than the night around it. But Eliza felt it watching her room. She rubbed her eyes. When she looked again, the figure was gone. Her heart thudded in her chest. She shut the curtains and turned away from the window. Maybe it was just her imagination. The house was too big, too old, too quiet. Meanwhile, in the room next door, Landon was carrying out a creep challenge he'd found on some online forum. He turned off all the lights, sat before an old vanity mirror, and lit a single candle. The challenge was called Summon the Headless One. He had to stare at his reflection and say 3 times, "I see you. The one with no head. Show me your face." Landon smirked. It all felt so stupid. He muttered the phrase 3 times. Nothing happened. "Lame," he said to his reflection. He was about to blow out the candle, but his reflection froze. Landon's grin in the mirror twisted, stretching wider, distorted, no longer his own. Then, slowly, the head in the mirror faded, vanishing into the dark behind him, leaving behind only a headless body dressed exactly like him. Landon froze, eyes wide. He wanted to scream, but his throat clenched shut. The candle flickered, then went out. In the suffocating darkness, he heard it, a dry, breathy giggle, right beside his ear. The old grandfather clock in the main hall struck 3 times. Its heavy chimes echoed through the sleeping house. Then 13 more minutes crept by. At exactly 3:13 a.m., Thomas Hargrave jolted awake. He shot upright in bed, cold sweat trickling down the back of his neck. He felt someone shaking him violently, but Clarissa lay beside him, breathing evenly in deep sleep. The room was silent, utterly silent, yet he couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. He listened, and then he heard it. Laughter. It wasn't loud, just a faint, giddy giggle, but it carried something unnatural, playful in a sickly way, soaked in malice. It didn't come from one direction. It slithered into his mind from everywhere at once. Thomas looked around the room. Nothing was out of place. He told himself it was just a nightmare. He lay back down and tried to sleep, but the sound lingered in his head, like a haunting lullaby looping without end. In Eliza's room, she woke too, not from laughter, but from a sudden chill. She opened her eyes and saw a deep red balloon floating at the foot of her bed. Its string hung low, barely an inch from the floor, but the balloon didn't move, as if an invisible hand held it in place. Eliza held her breath. She knew with certainty there hadn't been a balloon in her room before she went to bed. No window was open. No breeze could have carried it in. The balloon slowly rotated. It was watching her. Its glossy surface caught a sliver of moonlight through the window, casting a faint glow like a pupil. A primitive fear swelled in Eliza's chest. She yanked the blanket over her head. Her heart thundered. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She stayed that way until morning light broke through the blinds. When she finally peeked out, the balloon was gone. Clarissa, however, slept soundly through the night, but when she went to the bathroom in the morning, she froze in front of the mirror. Her reflection stared back, but something was wrong. The smile. She wasn't smiling, but the face in the mirror was. It was a strained, unnatural grin, like someone was pulling up her lips with invisible fingers. Clarissa rubbed her eyes, looked again. The smile was still there. She touched her face. Her skin felt normal. She forced a smile, and her reflection followed. But the grin grew too wide, too distorted. She screamed and stumbled back. Thomas rushed in. "What's wrong?" "The mirror. Look," Clarissa stammered, pointing. Thomas looked. He saw nothing but their panicked faces. "I don't see anything." "Clarissa, what is it?" Clarissa looked again. The grotesque smile was gone. Now her reflection mirrored her real face, pale and terrified. "Nothing," she whispered. I must have imagined it." But for the rest of the day, Clarissa avoided every reflective surface. Breakfast was quiet. Everyone looked tired. Landon didn't say a word. His face was pale. He kept glancing at dark corners. Thomas tried to start a conversation about fixing the fence. No one responded. Only Eliza noticed it. A subtle crack. Something invisible, but real. The house wasn't just silent, it was doing something to them. Bending them, warping them. As she washed dishes, Eliza looked out the kitchen window. The crimson river was calm under the morning sun, but something red floated slowly on the surface. She squinted. It was the clown nose Landon had picked up their first day. Drifting upstream, the presence inside the house didn't attack with fury. It crept like colorless, scentless gas, seeping into every crack, every room, every thought. It did not pounce. It waited. And its first victim was Thomas, the father, the protector, the one already fraying under pressure. The change didn't begin with screaming or panic. It began with strange silences. Thomas would be speaking, then pause mid-sentence. His eyes would glaze over, staring into nothing, as if listening to some private whisper no one else could hear. Seconds later, he'd continue talking, same topic, same voice, but something off. His tone would shift slightly. His smile wouldn't match the moment. "Eliza, get me a glass of water," he said one evening as they all sat in the living room. "I'm a Landon, Dad." Landon muttered, eyes still locked on his phone. Thomas blinked at him, as if seeing his son for the first time. "Oh, right, Landon. Sorry, my mind's been slipping lately." But it didn't just happen once. He started calling Clarissa by a different name. Lily. At first, she laughed it off, thinking it was a strange joke. But when he said it again, with affection in his eyes, an affection that wasn't meant for her, Clarissa's smile vanished. The clearest shift came when Thomas was alone. Eliza once caught him in the main hall, standing before the mirror, not to look at himself, but to rehearse. He was muttering nonsense lines, cycling through expressions, joy, sorrow, rage, terror, like an actor auditioning for a part. Then he chuckled, a dry, empty laugh that didn't belong to him. It was the same sound he'd heard at 3:13 a.m. One night, Eliza woke to creaking downstairs. She tiptoed toward the noise and saw something that froze her blood. Her father, still in his pajamas, sat at the dining table. Across from him was an empty chair. He was talking to it, hands gesturing, face animated, like in deep conversation. "No, I can't do that," Thomas whispered, voice trembling. "That's my family." Silence. He listened, nodding slowly, with dread. "I understand. The role must go on. The play can't stop now." He looked up. Moonlight from the window cast his face in a pale glow. It was still her father, but his eyes were vacant, lifeless. A twisted smile crept across his face, unfamiliar and cold. He was no longer Thomas Hargrave, the flawed man trying to protect his family. He had become a puppet, controlled by a hidden hand. His awareness was being rewritten, his memories overwritten. The role of Thomas Hargrave was being prepared for someone else. Eliza backed into the shadows, hand over her mouth to stifle her sobs. She knew then that her family was truly in danger, not from some murderous ghost, but from something subtler, crueler. It didn't want to take their lives. It wanted to take them. While Thomas was gradually losing himself, Clarissa began sinking into a different kind of horror, laughter. It started after she saw her twisted reflection in the mirror. She became hypersensitive to every laugh she heard. Children giggling on TV, Landon chuckling at a silly video, even Thomas's forced chuckles. Each one startled her, made her flinch. Laughter, once a sign of joy, had become something else. A warning, an omen of evil. Fear turned into obsession. She bought an old tape recorder from a second-hand shop in town. Every day, she wandered the house, holding it up, trying to capture sounds only she could hear. She sat for hours by the crimson river, rewinding and replaying blank cassettes, hoping to catch a faint giggle hidden beneath the wind and water. Her own smile began to change too. She no longer smiled naturally. Whenever someone cracked a joke, or something funny happened, Clarissa would try to smile, but it looked wrong, stiff, painful. Her facial muscles would twitch unnaturally, and her eyes shimmered not with joy but with terror. Her smile became a mask, a role she forced herself to play, to convince others she was still normal. One afternoon, Eliza walked into her mother's room and found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by dozens of cassette tapes. Clarissa wore headphones, eyes closed, mouth moving silently. That same forced grin stretched across her lips. "Mom? What are you doing?" Eliza asked softly. Clarissa flinched, pulling the headphones off. "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just listening to some old music." But as Clarissa stood, the headphones hung loose around her neck. Eliza heard the faint, scratchy sound leaking out. It wasn't music, it was a recording, a loop of giggles, high-pitched and mocking, mixed with static and an unintelligible whisper. It was the clown's laugh. Then came the breaking point. It was a stormy night. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the old house. Eliza awoke to a scream from her parents' room. She and Landon ran down the hall. The door was wide open. Inside, Thomas stood still in the middle of the room, his face blank. Clarissa was gone. On the bed, where she had lain, sat her tape recorder. The play button was still pressed. From its tiny speaker came a new recording, looping over and over. It was Clarissa's laughter, but wild, unhinged, laced with sobbing. And beneath it, almost buried, came the whisper of a man's voice, the voice of Robbie Bale. "Good girl, Lily. Keep laughing. Laugh until you're no longer you. Your performance is over now." Clarissa had been consumed by laughter, by fear, by the role. She had become the very thing that haunted her, and now she was gone. All that remained was a cassette, echoing her collapse. Clarissa's disappearance was the final crack. Landon, already shaken by his experience with the mirror, broke down completely. He locked himself in his room and refused to speak to anyone. Thomas remained adrift in a daze, half asleep, half aware, muttering nonsense about scripts and roles, as if nothing had happened to his wife at all. The burden now fell to Eliza. Her grief, her fear, her confusion, they all hardened into a single determination. She had to know the truth. She had to understand what was happening to her family, before they were all gone. She began where everything seemed to lead, the attic. Despite her father's warnings, she found a crowbar in the shed and began pulling out the rusted nails that had sealed the door for decades. Each nail screeched as it was pried loose. It took nearly an hour. When the last one came free, the door creaked open, revealing a set of rickety wooden stairs that disappeared into darkness. A blast of cold, stagnant air hit her face, laced with the smell of dust and something sweetly rotten. Eliza turned on the flashlight on her phone and stepped carefully up. The attic was huge and cluttered with forgotten belongings, all buried in thick webs. But in one corner stood something different, a rusty bed frame, a small table, and a wooden trunk. This wasn't just storage. It had once been someone's room, someone's prison. On the wall behind it, deep scratch marks carved into the wood spelled out frantic messages. "He sees me. He's always laughing. The smile isn't his." And 3:13. The final performance. She opened the trunk. Inside weren't clothes or keepsakes, but a leather-bound journal and dozens of yellowed newspaper clippings from 1964. She picked one up. The headline screamed, "Mysterious Disappearance of Circus Clown by the Crimson River." The article told of a clown named Robbie Bale, a performer with the Phineas Blackwood Circus. He was described as quiet, withdrawn, nothing like the cheerful figure he played on stage. After their final show in the town, he vanished without a trace. Police scoured the riverbanks. All they found were a few of his belongings. His body was never recovered. Eliza opened the journal. The handwriting inside was frantic. shaky. It was Robbie Bale's. The early entries spoke of circus life, travel, performances, exhaustion, but the tone soon changed. He began writing about Phineas Blackwood, not as a kind ringmaster, but as a tyrant, an abuser, someone hiding dark secrets behind the curtain. Robbie discovered something, some crime he couldn't name. He only called it worse than death. He tried to expose it, but no one listened to a clown. Blackwood found out, and the punishments began. The final page chilled Eliza. October 13th, 1964. He locked me up in the attic of the house by the river. He said this would be my stage. He said he'd turn me into an eternal smile. He said my head would never stop laughing. He's coming. I hear footsteps, and I hear him laughing. No, that's not laughter. That's the sound of something being torn. Eliza dropped the journal. Her hands trembled. Robbie Bale hadn't vanished. He'd been murdered, right here, in this house, and the killer was Phineas Blackwood. But that didn't explain the haunting. Why her family? She flipped through the papers again, searching for clues, and then she found it. A small article, almost hidden in the corner of a page. A courtroom report. Years after Robbie's disappearance, Phineas Blackwood had been tried for fraud. Unrelated to the missing clown, a witness had provided him with a false alibi. Someone had lied to the police. Someone helped the murderer walk free. The witness's name, Arthur Hargrave, her grandfather. The truth was as cold and merciless as the attic air. Arthur Hargrave, her grandfather. The name no longer brought to mind the vague image of an old man in faded photographs. Now, it was a chain link in a cursed sequence, a legacy of silence, of betrayal. Her grandfather had been complicit. He had traded truth for something, money, maybe, or safety. He had given a murderer the chance to vanish. And this house wasn't an inheritance. It was a sentence. Eliza sank to the dusty floor, nausea curling in her stomach. Every piece of the puzzle now locked into place. The laughter at 3:13 a.m. Her father slipping into a role that wasn't his. Her mother's descent into madness. None of it was random. It was a performance, a revenge play. And her family were the lead actors, unwilling, unprepared. They didn't just live in the house of the dead. They lived in the house where their ancestor helped bury the truth. The blood of silence, the blood of complicity, it flowed in them. As Eliza descended from the attic, the house felt different. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was whispering to her. She heard the sound of pages turning in the empty living room. She noticed the clown masks in the circus room shift ever so slightly as she walked past, tilting toward her. The portraits of the Hargrave ancestors on the walls seemed to follow her with hollow, judging eyes. But the worst change began inside her own mind. She started remembering things that weren't hers. While walking down the hall, she'd be seized by sudden waves of grief, of abandonment, of fear. She looked at her hands, and for a moment, they wore white gloves. She smelled face paint, sweat, terror. Robbie Bale had noticed her. She had found the truth. She carried the blood of the one who betrayed him, and above all, she was still conscious, still aware. The only one left who could recognize the stage. She was no longer just a witness. Now, she was being called to perform. "You've read the script, haven't you?" The whisper came from inside her skull as she stood before the bathroom mirror. It wasn't a sound, it was a thought, planted. Eliza stared at her reflection, heart racing. "Who are you?" she whispered back. "I'm the role left unfinished." The voice replied, "I'm the laughter trapped between these walls. Your family helped him write the final act of my life, but they got it wrong. The play never ended." Her reflection smiled, but not with her mouth. It was a grin from ear to ear, grief-ridden, insane. Robbie Bale's smile. "And you?" the voice said, through the lips of her mirror self. "You, child of the betrayer, you will help me bring the curtain down." Eliza screamed and stumbled back. When she looked again, The mirror was normal. Her face was her own, for now. But the invitation had been spoken. She had been pulled into a play that hadn't ended. Not as a victim, but as a stand-in. Eliza's transformation didn't come with screams or violent possession. It came with erasure, not of the body, but of identity. And that was far crueler. It started small. One morning, she looked in the mirror, and for a heartbeat, her reflection blurred. Her facial features melted like wet ink. She blinked. It was gone. But the unease lingered. Then came the forgetting. "Where's Eliza?" Landon asked, stumbling out of his room, still groggy, even though Eliza was standing right in front of him. "I'm here," she said. Annoyed, Landon stared at her, blankly, confused. Then recognition sparked. "Oh. Yeah. I didn't see you." He said it like an apology, but to Eliza, it was a terrifying sign. Thomas didn't see her at all. He walked past her in the hallway as if she were air. Sometimes he paused, stared at her with faint curiosity. "Little girl. Have you seen Clarissa? It's time for her scene." Her presence was fading. The books on the shelves, where she had scribbled her name inside, now showed only smudges. Photos on her phone began glitching. Her face disappeared behind static, or became a shapeless blur. Reality, both digital and physical, was wiping her out. She was being edited out of the script, to make room for another role. Desperate, Eliza clung to her identity. She grabbed a permanent marker and wrote her name on her arms. Eliza Hargrave. She taped childhood photos to her bedroom wall. She sat in front of the mirror for hours, whispering, "My name is Eliza Hargrave. I'm 17 years old. I like books and indie music. My mother is Clarissa. My father is Thomas. My brother is Landon." But the more she resisted, the faster it happened. One night, she woke up. The words on her arms had changed. Eliza Hargrave was now Robbie Bale, written in her own handwriting. She ran to the mirror. The face staring back wasn't entirely hers anymore. Her eyes seemed too wide, too dark, her cheekbones sunken, and her mouth, though sealed in fear, curved upward, slightly, like a smile was coming. "You can't run," whispered Robbie's voice inside her head. It no longer sounded foreign. It was part of her now. "The stage is built. The audience is waiting. You can't reject your starring role." She wasn't Eliza Hargrave anymore. She was a hollow vessel, a blank puppet, waiting to be filled. She was the understudy, chosen for the final act, and she could feel it. It was waiting for her, in the darkest, deepest part of the house, the basement. The door to the basement, once locked tight, now stood slightly ajar, as if inviting her. A cold draft curled up from the opening, thick with the scent of damp soil and something sweetly metallic, like dried blood. Eliza knew she had to go down. The play had reached its climax, and the final stage was waiting. She didn't take a flashlight. Light no longer mattered. As she stepped down each creaking stair, the darkness didn't feel empty. It watched her. It shifted and coiled like a living thing, whispering its approval. The basement had changed. It was no longer a cluttered space for forgotten boxes. It had become a grotesque stage. The moldy stone walls were hidden behind torn red velvet curtains. In the center of the room, a dim spotlight, its source unclear, shone down on a patch of dirt floor, marking a crude, circular stage. Around it sat shadowy figures, motionless, silent. Eliza squinted. Thomas, Landon, and a faint silhouette that looked like her mother. They were the audience, the puppets, soulless, watching, waiting for the final act. And at the center of the spotlight, resting on a small wooden pedestal, no body, only a head, a clown's head, floating inches above the wood. Its face was coated in cracked white paint, flaking off to reveal grey skin underneath. A tangle of filthy orange wig hair clung to the scalp, soaked in something dark. Its eyes were wide open, empty, dead, but its mouth, painted in a grotesque red smile from ear to ear, was twitching as if trying, with great effort, to laugh. "Welcome," a voice said, but the head's mouth didn't move. The voice came from everywhere, from the walls, the air, inside her skull. "Welcome to Robbie Bale's final performance." Eliza stood still, not in fear, but in resignation. She felt nothing now. She was the actor. She had memorized her lines. She was waiting for the cue. "Why?" she asked. Her voice sounded foreign in her ears. The clown had tilted slightly. "Why?" it echoed. "Because no great play should end on a lie. Your grandfather helped to kill, hang the final curtain on my tragedy. He thought burying my body would end it. He was wrong." The spotlight flared. "I don't need a body," the head growled. "The body is just a costume. I need a stage. I need a role. I need to be remembered." It drifted closer to her, hovering at eye level. Its breath was cold and sour, the scent of graves, of despair. "Your family gave me the stage. They played their parts beautifully. Your father, a puppet of failure. Your mother, a symphony of fear. Your brother, a silent spectator." It inched closer, until their faces nearly touched. "And now, I need a lead." "I won't kill you, Eliza Hargrave. Death is too simple, too boring. I'm giving you a gift, my role. You'll wear my smile, my pain, my name. You'll become Robbie Bale. You'll travel the world, perform my vengeance, so no one ever forgets me, ever." Its mouth opened, a bottomless black void. From it came not laughter, but shrieking, a cackle torn from the depths of something beyond death. The sound of a soul ripped apart, and it surged toward her. The moment the clown's head lunged toward her, something deep within Eliza snapped, not in terror, but in defiance. A final flicker of survival, a single ember of memory, who she truly was. She didn't scream, she didn't fight. She turned and ran up the stairs, past the velvet curtains, through the gaping basement door. Behind her, Robbie Bale's laughter exploded into a howl of rage, a scream of betrayal. The lead actress had fled the stage. Eliza crashed through the front door and into the night air. She didn't stop running, not once. She ran down the muddy road, toward the faint glow of the distant town. Her lungs burned, her legs shook, but something stronger kept her going, the raw instinct to escape. By the time she reached the edge of town, she was barely breathing. She collapsed against a brick wall. She was alive. She stumbled into the local police station. An older officer looked up from his desk, surprised. "I need help," Eliza gasped. "My family. The house by the Crimson River." The officer furrowed his brow. "The Hargrave place? I know that house. They just moved in a few weeks ago." "What happened?" "They're in danger. Something's in that house. My mom, she disappeared." The officer stood, confused. "Your mother? Clarissa Hargrave. I just saw her at the market this morning. She looked fine." Eliza's mind reeled. "No. Landon then? My brother?" The officer's frown deepened. "Landon? The Hargraves only have one child, a son, Thomas Jr. The blood drained from Eliza's face. "No, I'm Eliza. Eliza Hargrave." The officer stared at her, then quietly picked up the phone. "Let me check," he said. He tapped the keyboard, eyes flicking across the screen. Then he looked up, a mixture of confusion and quiet pity in his eyes. "There's no record of anyone named Eliza Hargrave in town records. The Hargraves are listed as a family of 3. Her world collapsed. Robbie hadn't lied. He hadn't killed her. He had erased her." She stumbled out of the station, wandered the unfamiliar streets. No one recognized her. She called her old friends in the city, but every voice on the other end asked the same question. "Who are you?" She didn't exist. She was a ghost, a memory scrubbed clean. Eventually, she ended up in a quiet park. She sat on a swing, gently rocking, empty. She had no name, no past, no home. Then, Something red rolled to a stop beneath her feet. A balloon. It bounced slightly as if asking her to look down. Eliza bent over, and she heard it. A whisper rising from the balloon's skin. Robbie Bale's voice. Calm, precise, like a director reminding his actor of the next scene. End of Act 1. The rest awaits in Dead Willow. The curtain has fallen, but only halfway. Eliza Hargrave no longer exists in any living record, yet she is not dead. Her name has been erased from the world of the living, but not yet written in the book of the dead. She is something in between, suspended, like a forgotten line in a script, waiting to be spoken again, in a place called Dead Willow. You've just finished part 1 of The Torn Smile, 2 Spirits, 1 Body. If you want to know what awaits in Dead Willow, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Whisper Horror Channel, where unfinished roles still wait for you.